Hey everybody, this video is called Calling the Scouts, and tonight we're going to continue our pass-through study here in the book of Numbers, chapter 13, where we're going to look at the scouts being called to go into the land of the promised land, into Canaan. So Numbers chapter 13, verses 1 through 3 starting out. It says, "And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I am given to the children of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers you shall send a man, every one a leader among them. So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran, according to the command of the Lord, all of them men who were heads of the children of Israel." So chapter 13 and the next chapter in 14, it focuses on Israel's massive failure at Kadesh. And these chapters, you have to go into the next book of Deuteronomy, chapter 1, verse 22 and 23. And you see that the people requested that the spies be sent out after Moses challenged them to take the land. And in verse 1, we see that God affirmed the people's desire and commanded Moses to send them. And the spies were specifically called to explore the land that God had promised to Israel. And the exploration gave valuable information to Moses for the conquest of the land. And in verse 3, the leaders were different than those mentioned in the census back in Numbers chapter 1, verse 27 and verse 10. And these men were likely younger than those that were listed in chapter 1, and they were probably about 40 years old or younger. And that's based on the ages of Caleb and Joshua here. And as part of God's plan, he used the report of the spies as a test of Israel's faith. And in a big chunk of verses here, it's going to be going from names from this tribe. So verse 4 through 16 says, "Now these were their names: from the tribe of Reuben, Shemua, the son of Zechur; from the tribe of Simon, Shaphat, the son of Hori; from the tribe of Judah, Caleb, the son of Zephunah; from the tribe of Issachar, Igal, the son of Joseph; from the tribe of Ephraim, Hosea, the son of Nun; from the tribe of Benjamin, Paltai, the son of Raphu; from the tribe of Zebulun, Gadiel, the son of Sodi; from the tribe of Joseph, that is the tribe of Manasseh, Gadi, the son of Susi; from the tribe of Dan, Emirio, the son of Gemali; and from the tribe of Asher, Sethur, the son of Michael; from the tribe of Naphtali, Nabi, from the son of Vosi; from the tribe of Gad, Guel, the son of Maki. These are the names of the men whom Moses sent to spy out the land. And Moses called Hoshea, the son of Nun, Joshua." So we see that Joshua had a different name before here. And we see that these are the men that were sent out as the spies. They were the chosen ones from each tribe, so that the spies would represent the entire nation of Israel. And Joshua was chosen as the leader of the group, as we see his name is listed first. And Hoshea, it means salvation or desire for salvation. And to Joshua, it means the Lord is salvation. So we see it's a pretty magnificent name that he is given. So if you name your sons Joshua, you're naming your sons the Lord is salvation. You're declaring it. In verse 17 through 20, "Then Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, and said to them, Go up this way into the south, and go up to the mountains, and see what the land is like, whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, few or many, whether the land they dwell in is good or bad, neither the cities they inhabit are like camps or strongholds, whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there are forests there or not. Be of good courage, and bring some of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes." So the spies were to determine the nature of the land, as well as the strength and weaknesses that they could expect as they moved into the land of the people. And remember from Exodus 3:8 that God had already told Moses that the land of Canaan was a good land, that it was large land flowing with milk and honey. So they already had the answers of what Canaan was going to be like. And then in Exodus 13:5, Moses even told the people of the goodness of the land. Moses proclaimed to them that the land was good. And Moses had unbelief. And why would Israel here have thought, if a negative report came back, would they go back to Egypt? Like, what did they have to gain or lose by these spies going into the land? And the season of the first ripe grapes was likely midsummer, and like probably the month of like July in our season breakdown. In verse 21 through 25, it says, "So they went up and spied out of the land from the wilderness of Zin as far as Rehob, near the entrance of Hamath. And they went up through the south and came to Hebron, Ahiman, Sheshai, and Tamai. The descendants of Anak were there. Now Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. Then they came to the valley of Eshcol, and there cut down a branch with one cluster of grapes. They carried it between the two of them on a pole, and they also brought some of the pomegranates and figs. The place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster which the men of Israel cut down there. And they returned from spying out of the land after 40 days. So Zin and Rehob was on the south and northern borders of the land. And Hebron is the first major city that the spies came into, which was a significant city throughout the Old Testament. And Abram had built an altar to the Lord in the city back in Genesis 13 verse 18, and Abraham and Isaac were buried here in Genesis 49 verse 31 in Hebron. And the descendants of Anak were the ancestor of Amhan, Sheshai, and Tamali, who were living at Hebron, and they were known for their height. And you'll see that when we go into the book of Deuteronomy in chapter 2, verse 21. And in verse 23, Eshcol, it means to cluster. And the mission took 40 days, as when God tests his people, it's a common period of 40 days. And it might remind you of the New Testament when Jesus was up on the mountain. He didn't eat for 40 days, and he was put to the test by Satan. In verse 26 through 29, it says, "Now they departed and came back to Moses and Aaron and all the congregation of the children of Israel in the wilderness of Paran. At Kadesh they brought back word to them and all the congregation, and showed them the fruit of the land. Then they told him and said, 'We went to the land where you sent us. It truly flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Nevertheless, the people who dwell in the land are strong. The cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the south. The Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the banks of the Jordan.'" So the scouts verify that God's promise about the land being flowing with milk and honey was true. They acknowledged that was true. That's what they saw. And then the spies reported that the land was good. However, the people were too strong to be conquered, that these people that they would have to conquer would be too big for them to handle. And their report recognizes the faithfulness of God's promise, the truth of his word. But despite all that God, God gave them, a promise that the land was flowing with milk and honey, and it was. They don't trust that God is going to make the way, even though God has promised them the whole land. And they doubt God. And in verse 30, it says, "Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, 'Let us go up at once and take possession, for we are well able to overcome it.'" So the spies' report, it caused a vocal reaction of the people that resulted in Caleb saying, pretty much hush to them. And Caleb called the people to go up and to take the land. And Caleb is trying to encourage them that the plan of God is going to come through, because it's God's plan, and God is sovereign, God is in control. And with God's help, they were going to be able to overcome these people no matter how strong they are. And Caleb encouraged the people to trust God and obey God, as God has made them able. And Caleb had courage to take a stand among the unbelief and the doubt in society. In verse 31 through 33, it says, "But the men who had gone up with him said, 'We are not able to go up against these people, for they are stronger than we.' And they gave the children of Israel a bad report of the land which they had spied out, saying, 'The land through which we have gone as spies is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people whom we saw in it were men of great stature. There we saw the giants, the descendants of Anak, came from the giants, and we were like grasshoppers in our sight, and so were we in their sight.'" So the other spies, they show their unbelief in response, and they try to instill further fear among the people of Israel with a faithless attitude towards God and the promises of God. And giants were used back in Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, for strong men who lived on the earth before the flood. And the Anak descendants were compared to them as the spies express that, our size, we're like grasshoppers to these people. They're like jolly green giants, or whatever you might think of in a modern day term. And so to wrap up here, we look at the spies who were chosen, they were commissioned and sent, and then they entered the promised land, and they gave a report of the land that matched God's promise of it being flowing with milk and honey. And Caleb, though, had to stand up among them and give the true report that even though it looks intimidating, we don't know what's ahead, but we can rely on the promises of God, that God's plan is going to come to pass. But all these other spies, besides Joshua and Caleb, they instill fear among the people. I mean, it sounds like almost like modern day with how much fear that is among people in society in many ways. So Joshua and Caleb, they are encouraging the Israelites to obey God and to take the land. And Caleb ought to be the example for us that we must be courageous as believers. We must take courage, as he took a stand against his peers, against the tide of unbelief and doubt, and the attitude of, despite that what God said about the land looks this way, they had their unbelief, and they didn't think the mission would come to pass. And when others want to doubt God's word, we need to take a stand. And let's check out Romans chapter 3, verse 4. It says, "Certainly not. Indeed, let God be true, but every man a liar, as it is written, that you may be justified in your words, and you may overcome when you are judged." So Paul's words here reflect on the slogan, let every man be a liar, let God be true. And the other spies responded to Caleb. And unbelief, it often presents itself as factual or practical or down to earth. However, the most factual, practical, and down to earth thing to do is to trust in the word of the living God. And their unbelief were not according to facts, but despite the facts. And faith or unbelief doesn't spring from circumstances or environment, but it is from our hearts, as which God must change in us. Unbelief, we need our stony hearts removed, and we need a responsive heart to believe. And the same concept goes with us today, that we cannot please God without faith, that unbelief is what damns us. And the faithfulness of Joshua and Caleb, it teaches us, or should teach us, that when everybody else wants to shut down and live in doubt and not rely on the promises of God, we need to take charge. We need to stand up, and we need to be the ones to encourage others, to encourage people to believe the word of God, even when others will not take that stand. So that's going to wrap up this video. I hope it was an encouraging video for you, and we'll see you next as we're going to look at the rebellion of Israel at Kadesh. So we're going to look at further rebellion involving Israel. So we'll see you tomorrow night with that video, and I hope you have a great rest of your Monday evening. God bless.